Hello, everyone. A word of welcome to everyone who's managed to join us for this webinar. We will be launching the Commission's investigative report on the sewer problem in the Vaal. As indicated in the event promo, the Commission will be in conversation with a number of guest speakers who are not only joining us today, but who also made contributions in the investigation of the matter that the Commission is reporting on today. To start with, we will be in conversation with Professor Johan Tempelhof. Johan is a professor of history at the University of the Northwest, and he has done extensive work on the history of the Vaal River and the prevailing pollution problem that we'll be discussing today. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you.
We will also be in conversation with Maureen Stewart. Maureen is the vice chairperson of Save the Vaal Environment, aka SAVE. SAVE is a civil society organization that has also done extensive work in addressing pollution challenges in the Vaal and surrounding areas. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you, and good day to all your listeners and audience.
We will also be in conversation with Samson Mukwena. Mr. Samson Mukwena is the coordinator for the Vaal Environmental Justice Alliance, or VEJA in short. And VEJA is another civil society organization that is working to unite communities to ensure environmental justice in the Vaal, which includes ending pollution on the Vaal River. Welcome, Samson.
Welcome, and thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Samson. And last but not least, we will be joined by Desigan Naidu. He's the CEO of the Water Research Commission, whose function is the promotion of informed water decision-making through science and technology and research. Welcome, Desigan.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. I've also been informed that the Department of Water and Sanitation was invited to be part of this event. Unfortunately, they didn't respond to the invitation. And really, that speaks to the broader issues of, accountability that were raised during the investigation of this matter, and issues I think that we, with time permitting, we'll delve deeper into during our conversation today, because during the investigation of this matter, there was a sense from some participants that there is apathy amongst government, functionaries when it comes to addressing the issues of pollution in the Vaal. And really, I think the absence of the DWS really reinforces that thinking, those perceptions that are already prevailing among residents, amongst groups that are working in the Vaal. I think, that said, we will move the conversation along. Before we start really with our discussion about the report, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. The first announcement I want to make is that attendees will not be able to engage viva voce or orally, but they are free really to engage with us using the chat function and field any questions and comments that they may have, and we will endeavor during the course of this discussion really to tap on into those conversations and discussion taking place on the chat function. Also, there will be, I was advised that there will be a poll running, opinion poll running. Please feel free also to engage with that poll. We will share the results at the end, towards the end of this discussion. Please give us feedback on the report and the conversation that we're going to be having today. And also, lastly, Please be reminded the report that we're discussing today will be made available on the SAHRC website after this conversation. So you're free to go look up the report, engage with the report, and really engage with the Commission on the report. Because even though we are reporting on an investigation, the issues continue. So we'll welcome continued engagement on the issues raised on the report. To really start our discussion or our conversation today, where we'll be discussing the specific issues raised in the report, I really think it's important that we situate the report or the investigation that led into the report into the grander or the broader context of environmental justice. Perhaps I'll start with you, Maureen. If really you can take our viewers through, why are environmental rights so important, and why is this general discourse around environmental justice important? I know these discourses are normally associated with tree huggers, but I want you to tell our viewers today, why do environmental matters matter to the ordinary man and woman on the streets?
Thank you very much, Shirley. First of all, the environment, doesn't get the priority that it should get. And the same applies to environmental justice, for people living in all walks of life. If we don't preserve our environment, we're going to have nothing left for posterity. And that is the big thing. We have seen at the Vaal in particular a deterioration of the ecology, the fish life, the bird life. These are all things that we want to see our children and grandchildren enjoy into the future. We also want to be, subscribe to our constitution that talks about the importance of having a healthy environment around us. And if we don't have activists like Johan, like Samson and others, we're not going to have an environment left. So that, to me, is very important too. And we need to be sure that government does give more priority attention to environmental issues.
Thank you for that, Maureen. I think you really raised an important issue that, unlike any other right, environmental violations, don't only impact on the present generation, but, they impact on generations to come. And also, unlike most rights violations, they don't only have an impact where they occur, but they have, multiply effects, different communities, as is the case with the Vaal, different provinces, different countries even, but yet there is so little attention that has been given to environmental rights. Perhaps I'll come to you, Samson. We've seen our communities, barricading streets, because of one rights violation or the other. We've seen, citizens, marching into corporate offices, because they are grieved by violations of the right to equality. Why do we not see that kind of, concerted action, in our communities when it comes to environmental pollution, when it comes to the issues of, sewer spillages? Why have we not seen that in our communities? And how do we change that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Environmental issues are not in the mainstream political discussion and debate, and media also tend to not address, or they are not making headlines and stories. But for a number of years, we have seen environmental justice movement growing significantly in South Africa from the late 90s towards build-up of World Summit on Sustainable Development. We've seen in the early 2000s that communities starting being involved on environmental rights issues, engaging on governance issues like the water forums on and so on. And when we look at the landscape of South Africa in terms of the environmental justice movement, have grown significantly because communities and people start to notice that if they don't protect their environment, they don't have anything to fight for. They'll be left with nothing, especially when it comes to our natural resources like your water resources, your natural environment, your grasslands, and so on and so forth. So we have seen in recent times that communities starting to take actions to protest that big corporations, government, especially challenging water and sanitation department, environmental affairs, in terms of protecting the second generational rights, especially Section 24 of the Constitution, because it is key that if we had to protect the environment for the future generation, we need to start now to make sure that those rights are really protected, and state takes responsibility to make sure that they fulfill those second generational rights.
All right. Thank you for that, Samson. And I think it is certainly our hope as the Human Rights Commission that this report will contribute, towards that greater discourse around environmental justice, will contribute to raising greater awareness about the importance, of environmental rights and the need for action, not only from the top, but from the grassroots in ensuring that these rights are respected by not only private citizens, but by also government. With that said, I think we will now move to the report. And before we really start discussing some of the details or the specific issues raised in the report, I'll give our panelists, an opportunity just to briefly give your overall reflections on the report. I will start with you, Jessigan, and you can follow Johan, and then Samson and Maureen in that order, please. Your general reflections on the report and its contribution really to this discourse that we're having about environmental justice.
Thank you, Shirley, and thanks also to my fellow panelists for their inputs already. Look, it is unfortunate that government is not represented here, and I can share with you that this is a subject of great discussion within government. I've been part of some of those fora in the MINMEC, and the minister has asked for some specific briefings on this, so it is a high priority issue. I should also point out we're talking about a river that has been one of the hardest working rivers in the world since about the late 1800s. And the state of the river and the river system is a product of many, many, many years of decisions around South Africa's industrial platform. Many of those decisions we would actually disagree with in the 21st century. So there is a long history to this, although there is a sharp focus on what has happened in the last couple of years. The overall impression of the report is, one, I think it's a well-composed report. It is balanced. It has engaged the people who needed to be engaged. Of course, there are many more people that can be engaged. And I think it's put its finger on the pulse of the various components of the problem. The first of the components of the problem is that, yes, we have to reorganize our thinking about whether or not the industrial platform that we're using in the country as a whole, and maybe in Gauteng specifically, is indeed the correct one. Because it's clearly destructive to the environment, and the environment is a cornerstone of the Sustainable Development Agenda. And this is not just a local discussion, this is a global discussion. The WEF has talked about this as the Great Reset in their January meeting, for example. The second issue I think we should be quite sharp on, and the report does put it down there, is that we have to engage the issue around the capability of water services authorities in the form of municipalities' ability to actually manage that function. And I'm sure we're going to unpack a fair amount of that in the discussion that we're going into just now. But the third thing that I think that we should talk about, and there's some elements inside the report that are pointing in this direction, around questioning whether or not we have the right paradigm around how we're engaging water and sanitation in the 21st century in this country. Should we still have sewage pipes, for example, Or should we go to the available technology that we have now that talks about non-sewage systems? But I'll pause there, Shirley, because I'm sure that we'll unpack a good deal of this as we get into the discussion.
Of course, I think that would be an important point, when we discuss, where to from here. But I think also in your introductory point, Desigan, you underscore that this is not a local issue. Yes, we are discussing the Vaal today, but we know there are challenges in Mpumalanga. I, for one, have worked extensively on sewer challenges in Mpumalanga, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but some of the pollution is going into the Vaal from the Mpumalanga end. I know there are issues as well in the northwest. There's a recent case where the court found that the municipal manager should be criminally liable for the violations. There are issues everywhere. So I think as we continue, it's really important, particularly for our viewers, that this is not just a Vaal issue, but it's a national issue. It's a global issue, like you've underscored, Desigan. Johan, your reflections, please?
Right. I think we have to look at it somewhat in a larger context. First of all, water is an extremely scarce resource in Southern Africa. And this manifested most markedly in the drought of 2014 up to 2019-20. So what happened was in two cities of South Africa, we had processes of creative destruction that took place in a resilience context. First of all, in Cape Town, by 2018, they were faced with day zero. And all of a sudden, June 2018, we were faced with the collapse of Mfuleni's water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure. And that became a crisis of substantial proportions. So when you look at this situation, I get the impression that what is of vital importance is addressing issues of water security. In the case of Cape Town, they were able to move out of the process of creative destruction into the route of a restoration, and they are now saving water. This is drinking water. In the case of Mfuleni, we've had a number of interventions of governance authorities, and these have proven not to be effective up to the current point in time. And one has to ask yourself the question, what went wrong? Why is it that in Cape Town, for example, they could resolve this crisis actually in the Western Cape, and here we are sitting in Gauteng, in the largest local municipality in the country, and we were unable to be of assistance and respond to the qualms of residents and industries about the state of the deteriorating state of the infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, and the downstream impact it had on the Vaal River system.
Okay. I think, Chris, I see on the chat function, Chris and Gordon really agree with you, Johan, that this issue must be viewed in the greater context of water security, speaking about the unsustainability of our current water system. So thank you for that. Really, I think for the sake of time, just be brief, your brief reflections, Maureen and Samson, so that we can start dealing with some of the specific issues in the report, please.
Yeah, thank you. Shirley, picking up on what Johannes just said, I think the Cape Town people pulled together. That was one of the important things. In Gauteng, or in particularly in the Mfuleni municipality, we've got a situation where people don't pull together. We've also got a situation where the different levels of government are not sort of enforcing the legislation. This has really been the biggest problem, and this has been a deterioration of over 10 to 12 years. It didn't happen overnight. So I think that the report, in fact, has highlighted very much that the legislation is very good, but the enforcement is not there. And that is where we need to look. I think we also need to look at the ability of local councils, both from a financial perspective, skills, etc., to run, water systems. This was something that was inherited, from the previous apartheid government, but maybe we should be looking at things differently and a different kind of development of, water and sanitation, where perhaps there could be private-public sector involvement, and it could be run as a business. That's my feeling.
Okay, thank you for those reflections, Maureen. Something?
From our side, I think start with the Constitution, Section 27, that water is guaranteed in our Constitution as a fundamental human right, and it's where the report is focusing on. It further goes to highlight the international law, especially South African government as a party to the United Nations Resolution 6429 on water as a fundamental human right, and that UN Assembly resolution was adopted by Human Rights Council. So from that point of view, water as a fundamental right has been guaranteed in our legislation. Then it addresses the issue of the state. South African state capability to then institute those fundamental human rights in terms of Section 27 and other related legislations. And that capability of the state is key, because if the state cannot fulfill those fundamental human rights, then we are in a very, very chaotic situation. And we will address this further in what the report highlights in terms of the lawlessness that we are seeing in terms of where courts have ordered local authorities to institute these particular orders. Then the state itself failing to do that, then we are in the report that outlined that particular process clearly in its findings. And for us, that's where the problems lie, on the capability of the state to institute those fundamental human rights.
Thank you for those. Thank you for those reflections. Perhaps we will now move the conversation really to delve into the issues of, what has caused these issues. I know we've touched on it briefly, in the opening remarks. In terms of the report, this issue, comes to the notice of the Human Rights Commission in 2018, following media reports on the issue, and those reports really reference a lot of the work that all of you have been doing in the Vaal for many years. So, and the report really goes on to date, the challenges to as far back as 20 years ago. Perhaps as our historian Johan, really take our viewers through where did this really issue start, and what are some of the causes, the root causes that has led us to where we are today? Briefly, please.
Well, historically, one can say the transition to a new system of governance and comprehensive changes within the manner in which water was governed as of 1998, when the National Water Act came into effect. We find that it's water for all that has to be provided for everybody. Now, in terms of governance, there appears to have been significant lapses. First of all, is the system of cooperative governance, authorities coming in to help each other and work out of a crisis. For example, in 2009, Rand Water started helping Emfuleni to resolve the Sebokeng wastewater treatment works, which is one of the major culprits. Mfuleni later on withdrew because they had not been receiving any payments from Randwater withdrew because Mfuleni did not pay them water revenue that they required. And it's run up into millions of rands up to the present. So that's one of the problems that emerged. So on the one hand, we have a demographic problem that emerged. In the 1990s, Mfuleni moved to a phase of post-industrial development. And that implied that industries started reducing their activities. What is today Arcelor in the 1990s still had a working component of more than 50,000 people. And this is reduced, I think at present, into less than 4,000 people working at one of the major industrial installations in the region. So we have urbanization, and it has created a major problem with growing unemployment of an estimated 37 to 42% of the local population. So poverty is endemic. So we find that government, although it's been trying to bring the ties together, was unable to bring a local government, provincial government, regional water authorities, as well as central government into the permutation. And one of the major problems was that there was a lack of technological know-how within the system. After 1994, as many local officials in the water infrastructure sector went into early retirement. And we find that there was a lack of systems knowledge. And this led to several crises. By the onset of the 2010s, there were serious problems, and it came prominently from SAVE and also VEJA that emerged in that time. So now we are sitting with the issue of the problem has become so desperate that what the South African National Defence Force in 2018 could resolve the problem, not Ergo could resolve the problem. The Department of Water Affairs stepped in to deal with the problem, but they obviously have a lack of funding. We have all the policies in place. We have a new master plan for South Africa and a commitment by government to upgrade the infrastructure. But we are now in a pandemic situation, and we have to accept that it's not business as usual. But the whole issue is that you need a responsibility of government and government officials to play a very prominent role from a technological and an environmental perspective on what happens at the ground level. Whereas your political role players should be less prominent and less dominant in making key decisions about funding that is misappropriated and making responsible decisions in the interest of people. Now, I'm not promoting a rule by technologists. I'm suggesting that there should be a responsible management, and at this point in time, one of the solutions would be...
Johan, perhaps we can pause there for now, because we are going to discuss some of the solutions later in our discussion. Because I just wanted to focus with the conversation on why are we where we are today, and certainly the issues that you are raising. I've noted your hand, Disigan. Certainly the issues that you are raising about infrastructure that has not kept up with development, issues of human resource challenges. Those are all issues that are captured in the report as some of the root causes that has led us to where we are. And other issues is that are raised in the report is the issue of the aging infrastructure, lack of maintenance, of the infrastructure, maladministration, and the issues of cooperative governance, which are very important that you've touched on, as well as issues around vandalism of infrastructure. So basically, we've had a cocktail of issues that have led us to where we are. Disagan, you can come in. Sorry, on really why are we where we are today? The causes.
No, Shirley, let me give you some statistics, and let me start firstly with the issue around the local authorities and this new phenomenon that we have since 1997 for water services authorities. So there are 144 municipalities that are designated as water services authorities. Mfuleni is one of them. Now, in the surveys that we have done, and this comes from something called the National Benchmarking Initiative, as well as MUSA, which is self-assessment exercise, this is what we're finding. Out of that 144, 57 of them are classified with the COCTA definition of vulnerable or dysfunctional in the domain of their water management. When you go to the next level of the nature of the challenge, the next thing that you see is that only 72% of these water services authorities overall don't have the requisite capability in the form of competency to carry out that function. If you go further than that, you see that numbers like this, 77% of them are not doing the 8% budget around infrastructure maintenance. 98% of the authorities, including the ones that have been spoken about in this conversation as being a little bit better, do not have maintenance schedules in the system. So there is the issue around, you're given the authority to these folk. Are they getting the right support? Is the regulation in place, and is that regulation being enforced, and how you do that? But the second part of the story, which we cannot ignore, is the issue of funding. So for 2 years running now, there has been no increase in the water tariffs in this country. And one of the real dangers of that is that we start following the line of the electricity folk. Because in the 1990s, we were talking about South Africa having cheap electricity, but that was really false. What that really meant is we were able to keep the electricity price low and not invest in the new infrastructure that we now know we so badly need. I mean, we are living in blackouts every week, almost continuously. Now, there is a real danger this is going to happen in the water domain as well. So the lack of the tariffing in the water domain to get the funding into the system is going to result in a much squeezed problem going into the future. The third issue that we need to engage is that we have far too much of a sectoral focus in the way we operate. So let's take the two sectors that I'm talking about, water and electricity, right? So the one negative is that NERSA has now granted Eskom a 15% increase for the current financial year, which means that the issues that Johan referred to around the ability of the municipalities to be able to pay people like the water boards gets even less now because there's a stretch in the municipal function. The second thing is that when you start converging these and you start looking at things like the water, energy, food nexus, and if you just take that part of water and energy, you will find that there is a huge opportunity to actually generate electricity, energy from the water sector, as opposed to water just being a user. Now, if we had this discussion together about electricity and water, we would actually find energy solutions in water. We'd be able to use the funding that we currently have in a much smarter way. And we'd be able to organize for the kind of water security that we've spoken about. So the question is, what is the key problem? And I think the key problem rests on two primary things. The first is that we do work in silos in spite of all of our rhetoric. The second is that the conservatism in the water sector is simply not helping the cause. And I referred to sanitation before. We have the ability to have 100% access to sanitation in this country on the back of non-sewage sanitation way before 2030. And we need to really make that push inside that direction. So the issues around the historical legacy, they're absolutely correct. But we are sitting at a point now where I think we can make very different decisions around going into the future. And I think that is where we need to put our effort. Thank you.
Thank you for those contributions. And there's a message from Vanessa, echoing that she's from KZN, but they are facing, similar challenges. And I've highlighted earlier as well the investigations we've done in Mpumalanga and other areas, that really the root causes that we are discussing can be found in each and every municipality that is having the challenge. So it's then I don't know if it is surprising, but it really is concerning, because we know the cause and effect, but yet we've not been able to address these issues. I now want to move really the discussion around to the issues around attribution, and I really alluded to this earlier in the discussion, that when you read through the report, you can see that various departments really are trying to say, no, it's not me, look at the next person. The municipalities say, no, you can't just look at us. There are other municipalities that are polluting. And COGTA says, no, you cannot look at us. Look at DWS. And DWS is saying, and we have given them funding. They're squandering the money, but the municipality is saying the money you're giving us is not enough. So I just want to come to you really, Solomon and Maureen. How difficult has it been for organizations like yourselves and for citizens really to hold someone to account in such circumstances where everyone is just trying to kick the ball as far away from themselves as possible? You can start, Solomon, and you can go ahead, Maureen, and you can follow Solomon.
Yeah, it's been extremely difficult, and you've actually hit the nail on the head there in terms of lack of accountability. And taking that further, that also means consequence management. We dealt with many municipal managers at Mfuleni, and it's always a funding issue. It's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. Water and sanitation, we need to do more. Water and sanitation say it's not our role to operate municipalities, and that is probably true. But there seems to be, on the one hand, a kind of passing the buck system that exists, and on the other hand, there isn't any consequence management. If you're in a situation of a municipal manager and a technical director in charge of water and sanitation and other service delivery requirements, you're getting paid for responsibility and for actually providing a service to the people who live in the municipality. That is the biggest problem. Nobody takes responsibility. When the going gets tough, then the person is either transferred someplace else or he resigns and does something else. And somebody new comes in, they inherit the problems. And again, the circle starts all over again. So, that to me, it's a balance of consequence management and passing the buck needs to be dealt with. And there are roles and responsibilities at the various levels of government which are clearly written. But again, take, for example, the Water and Sanitation Department will issue a directive because Mfuleni is polluting the Vaal River and the streets of Kaapstad. But nothing happens because the municipalities start back and they say, well, we haven't got the money to do this. And so everybody stops. So there needs to be a whole, in my opinion, a restructuring of the water sanitation sort of sector. And I'll take what Mr. Desai said, that we need to not work in silos and we need to use new technology. And there must be new technology for sanitation in the world because we can't be carrying on with the same old stuff.
Thank you for that.
I think Maureen and
thank you. You can come in. You may proceed, Solomon. There's an echo. I'm not sure from who.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that I'm not sure.
You can proceed, Solomon.
Yeah, but I think the lack of the intergovernmental relations is quite a problematic in terms of who must take full take responsibility around this particular crisis. But one of the chairman of the Portfolio Committee on Water and Sanitation, Advocate Dilange, said to the department about 10 years ago that failure of the Department of Water Affairs to enforce National Water Act and Water Services Act will create massive chaos. And he was warning the department then that the department is not taking full responsibility to implement the National Water Act. And for us, where the buck stops. When you look at internally in DWS, there's clear no communication between water services and water enforcement and water quality units. Everybody do his own thing somewhere and all of that. And one of the biggest problems that we are facing at the local level is interforums or inter-stakeholders that are popping up all over the area. And that then created confusion in terms of exactly what is a strategy, what is a plan, and how that plan is then executed. A typical example in the Vaal intervention strategy. We have so many intercommittees that are not coordinated by anybody, and then that does not feed back to the public in terms of what exactly is happening, and then you read into media how much is being lost in the process. That's a fundamental problem. It also addresses the question on the enforcement. You have so many enforcement within the department, and if one is lacking in terms of enforcing its own regulations, you find the others not being available. And the report addresses that in terms of what will be the role of water enforcement if they are failing to implement what they are supposed to be doing in terms of the act. That's a fundamental problem that we've been struggling to make sure that there's an enforcement mechanism. That is one that is looking in terms of protection of the entire ecosystem. So that will be my input on the issue.
Your contribution. Thank you for that. And there's a view, Jessica, coming back to you. Really, there's a view that the buck should stop with the Department of Water and Sanitation, because if you think about it, who issues the licenses to these municipalities to run these water services? Who is ultimately responsible for enforcing the National Water Act? And also, if you look at this problem, as indicated, is endemic everywhere, and DWS appears to be the common denominator in all the provinces, in all the municipalities. So is it not a fair comment then that the buck should stop with them?
Well, that's an interesting interpretation. In fact, that's one of the current conundrums. The current conundrum is that the Minister of Water, who is the custodian of South Africa's water resources on behalf of the public, does not have authority over the water services authorities themselves. The water services authorities get their designation from the Minister of Cocktail, while the function is in fact with the Minister of Water and Sanitation. This is something that is being currently engaged, and one of the proposals that is on the table is whether or not the regulatory framework can include a kind of licensing mechanism with performance indicators like you would have with any other water license, but now on water services authorities. And if we manage to crack that, I think a fair amount of the solution will be found. But let me go beyond that. One of the issues that has come up in many, many municipalities, and we work fairly closely with SAHRC around something called the National Benchmarking Initiative for Water, is that within the municipalities themselves, there isn't a sufficiency of coordination inside the system. So you have the ironic situation where municipalities are in fact bankrupt around certain of their services while they're returning other funds to Treasury, because those funds have been so clearly earmarked and fenced off, you can't have any cross-subsidization inside the system. So aspects of the water infrastructure grant, for example, can't be used for maintenance, in spite of the fact that in some places maintenance is exactly what you need
What
to
is
be,
required? Yeah.
what is required. So the question, I guess, is what is the solution? And I think it amounts to a couple of simple things. First of those things is that we have this high-level plan that everyone agrees with called the Water and Sanitation Master Plan. Clearly, what we need now is the next level of detail in a tactical strategy that will deal specifically with municipalities and how they're able to manage the water together with the
Yes.
support system.
Just again, we are briefly coming to that point. I just want us to go through the report step by step. We really come. I know you've been burning really to tell us where to from here, but we are really coming to that point briefly. But before we come to that point, really, Johan, I really would like you to reflect, on the impact of these problems on people, their health, their environment. Because we can speak about environmental pollution in general, in general terms, but I think it's really important to understand what is the impact of these on people, on the environment, on livelihoods. Please briefly reflect on that.
Right. In 2019, we conducted an EU-funded research project on how people from the bottom up see the water crisis that was playing off in Mfuleni. And we looked broader. We went up to Denisville at the upstream of the Vaal barrage, and we spoke to people there. And I've been reading a lot about this lately. The issue of people feeling dejected. They feel being done in by government. Promises have been made. We all have the right to water and an environment that is good for us, but nothing happens on the ground. And people do not have money. So what happens is you have protests emerging, and these protests are an extension of a subversive process of the destruction of infrastructure that is carrying on. We call it vandalism, and it's an underexplored field in our water sector. People feel they have no ownership. It doesn't belong to them. You have artisanal miners breaking sewage pipes to get to mining gold, etc., in Gauteng. So these are compounded issues, and people feel they are dejected. And if you can ask Samson, if you have to go into Sebokeng and you see under what conditions people are living, they have pigs, they have sheep, they have dogs, they have children playing in mud, and that mud emanates from sewers running in Sebokeng. So even the natural wetlands have been invaded to the extent that they cannot function properly and naturally anymore. And people do not see the environment as they would typically have done in a rural setting. They would have respected water. They would know what its value is. When they reach the city, they expect to have housing, they expect to have sanitation, and they expect to have water. And we say, yes, we can give this to you. But what remains behind is the issue of getting a societal commitment and a societal ownership of saying this is our water resources, this is our infrastructure, it works to our benefit. And there we have a disconnect that needs to be addressed. And the best example of that is the vandalism and the protests that had been going on at the Sebokeng works. And that is a symptom to me of even workers on the site protesting with the people because they wanted more money. And the people, unemployed people outside, protesting because they don't have jobs. The minister previously promised them 6,000 jobs in 2015. So this type of thing from the bottom up We feel that people feel that they are being neglected by the local authorities, the authorities responsible for these services, as well as central government.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the issue of human dignity of the affected
Yes,
communities, was really underscored as well in the report, because we always tend to see, these rights violations in terms of the right to water, and the like, but really the impact on the dignity of the people, the impact on children's rights who are playing, in sewer. So these are really some of the important issues that are highlighted in the report, that really these challenges are not abstract issues, they're not academic issues, but they actually have tangible impacts on people, ordinary people. They affect, their food security, they affect their water security, they affect their health, and their well-being, and the right to property. So these are some of the issues that are highlighted in the report. And it's very interesting. Also in the report, it says that there are 19 million people that depend on the Vaal for water. That is for domestic and commercial use. And I presume that this 19 million, although is a very staggering figure, but it has not taken proper account of people in neighboring provinces, people in neighboring countries that are impacted. So, but it's no less than 19 million people are adversely impacted. There's also a specific mention of the impact on the ecosystem, and the mention of the impact on the yellowfish, for example, that now they're in danger of extinction. And of course, that affects livelihoods of people who rely on it, for commercial purposes. So I think it was really important for us really to stress that these issues are not academic, these issues are not abstract, they are real, and they have real impact on people. Before we move towards the end, I will allow you, Maureen, really to just briefly reflect on some of the issues I've mentioned, the tangible impacts on the ordinary man on the streets in the communities that you work in as SAFE.
Yes, we see it all the time, and right across Mfuleni, and also we see it in places like Denaysville on the Vaal Dam as well. It makes living conditions impossible. The health risks are enormous. The other thing too, it discourages investment. In businesses which will create employment, and especially the tourism industry. The tourism industry was, developing very nicely along the Vaal River. Johannesburg is not on a river, and people love water, so they want to, have their recreation there, and the Vaal River is the ideal place. But nobody wants to come to a smelly river, to sort of be entertained. So it's caused job losses, if anything, in the Mfuleni area of jurisdiction. And there is tremendous opportunity there. So we're losing those opportunities further downstream of the barrage in Parys. There's river rafting. People don't want to do that at the moment because of the water quality. So it's so important to get this right. Really and truly is to have a clean river, which will then impact on all communities as well, because if the river is fine and if the systems are working, then
I see we've lost Maureen there, but I think really she was underscoring the impact on livelihoods, that people cannot make a living because of this challenge we are facing. We are quickly, we are quickly running out of time. Really, I would have loved us to discuss, the legacy of the bucket system and how really it is shaping responses to the challenge, especially the issues that are raised earlier. How our communities seem to be more tolerant of this challenge than any other rights violation. And I'm really wondering what the connection may be between that and the bucket system, where communities had to live with their waste side by side. So it really would be an interesting debate for another day. Because of time, really, I want us to touch on the issue that all of you have been burning to touch on. We know that, say, for example, has been to court. There's been several court judgments in the matter, but yet the issues remain unresolved. So where to from here? Disagan, I know you were burning to take us to that point. So I'll allow you to have the first bite, and then I'll hand over to you, Solomon, and sorry, Samson, my apologies, and you, Johan.
Thank you, Shelley. Yes, I have been dying to get to this point. The solutions are available. So
Mm,
the first point, I think, is that we have to have a higher investment into the technological frame. And this was mentioned by the other panelists as well. And South
mm,
Africa has the benefit of this WRC, a national institution, which is 50 this year, and a
yes.
very productive South African community of practice in science and innovation. In fact, we're in the top 20 in the world with regards to productivity. We need to pull it out of the laboratories and give it a chance to work on the ground, precisely in areas like new sanitation that you mentioned. We should not be
Mm,
talking about the bucket system at all. The second
mm,
issue that I want to put on the table is what I started talking to earlier, is that we need a specific tactical plan around empowering municipalities to be able to carry out their water services authority function. It should utilize the capabilities that are already there. I mean, our water boards are good institutions and they act as utilities in the system. And where they have been in partnership with municipalities, and Johan has referred to an example earlier, it has worked quite well. So having that into a more formalized methodology is something that we should consider as part of this tactical plan. But the very last point I want to make is that we
mm,
have to do this with a human rights-based approach because
yes.
we fall short with all of the other technologically and engineering driven solutions that we've had, not only in the water sector, but in many others. And besides
Mm,
our own national commission, you guys, as the South African Human Rights Commission, we're also part of this global network with the Human Right to Water, and they have a series of tools and toolboxes to assist us in this direction. And I think if we manage to knit that, if the different
mm,
players can find their role inside the system, we might be able to have a very different conversation in 5 or 10 years from now. Just like the folk in Singapore, who started
mm,
off with a river that was essentially a sewer, and look at
yes.
Singapore today. Thank you,
Mm.
Shirley.
So technology, and I also like the emphasis you've put on a human rights lens, and I think that is definitely underscored in the report, in some of the recommendations that have been made, which include, greater awareness of constitutional and legislative obligations by government, functionaries, which includes the human rights obligations to citizens. And there's also emphasis in some of the recommendation on, upholding of the rule of law, because we cannot have a situation in the country where courts have ruled over and over again on what needs to be done, but it is really not being done. And there was also mentioned in the report of time bound and costed plans for addressing the challenges. And I think the challenge you are posing, Jessica, is that those plans should include, technology, the utilization of technology to address these issues. And also, there was mention in the report of criminal investigations of some of these issues. And perhaps let me come to you, Maureen, as an organization that has been to court. You've gotten relief from courts which are not being implemented. In your view, does the proposal of criminal investigation, have mileage in resolving this matter? Your thoughts on that?
Yes, that is something that we have looked at, and other organisations have looked at too. We have gone the route of the High Court as opposed to the criminal justice, criminal system. Our intention is to get it right. We don't particularly want to put people in jail, but we want to see action. And we came to the end of the road with the Mfuleni Local Council. We had a very, very strong court order against them, and they were incapable of actually being able to implement that because the council is dysfunctional. And we have subsequently joined the other tiers of government to that order. And our litigation is proceeding because we do believe that the laws are there. They need to be enforced. And unfortunately, we've done a lot of talking. We've went to a lot of meetings. We have tried to avoid the court process. It's an expensive process. But, we find ultimately this is the route to go. And, everybody with a role and responsibility must be all brought together. And the other aspect of our court orders too is to improve communication. Because the government at all levels is not keen to communicate with civil society, and this is actually unacceptable. We want to be part of the solution. We don't want to. We don't want to just throw the problems at them. We want to work with them. But this has been difficult. But we are proceeding in any case because everything just takes too long, and it's we've been in this process for 10 years, so I'm happy we're getting to the crux now.
All right. Thank you, Maureen. We've desperately run out of time, but I know we were given a bit of a 5-minute leeway. So I'll use the remaining few minutes to give an opportunity to you, Johan, and Samson to really briefly just, where tell us where to from here. What should be done to really finally bring about the resolution of this matter? Very briefly, please. We have run out of time.
First of all, talking about human rights, I'm in complete agreement with it, but we should ask ourselves, how am I contributing to building out South Africa, building up South Africa? What is my civil responsibility? That needs to be ingrained much better within society as a whole. And in the process, I think the authorities, the officials at grassroots level, right up to the senior levels of government, would be able to step up and with this knowledge, this awareness that we are living in a social democracy, they should take their responsibility. That's the second thing. The third thing is it revolves to a large extent around the available funding. And South Africa's finances are very dicey, especially in the time of COVID. And we have to work carefully with our available resources. But my opinion is government now has an exceptional opportunity to start improving the infrastructure by employing unemployed people and give them some incentives to become effective water workers, for example, or construction workers. And in addition, you cannot do these things without your private sector. You have to work in a very close partnership, and we have to start eradicating with meaning the whole thing of unlawful activities and what appears to be corrupt activities within levels of funding institutions that have very strange deals, especially when it comes to large infrastructure. Finally, can I just mention another thing? We need to respect the water we get from Lesotho. We are using it, and we need to work more carefully with that. because we owe it to our neighboring state, and that's a principle of universal human rights that needs to be observed.
Thank you for that, Johan. My apologies for interjecting. We are running out of time. Samson, you literally have 30 seconds. You're cutting short. Where
One,
to from here?
we need to depoliticize our water management system in South Africa. And to
Yes.
depoliticize that component, we then have to establish our catchment management agencies as a matter of agency. We need to make sure that the water management system in South Africa is inclusive. It must only address the injustices of the past. On the issue of dignity, we must make sure that investments go back to the poor and low-income areas where there must be proper sanitation, proper access to water, and that will address the issue of fundamental human rights. And we'll look at this report as an organization because it clearly details in terms of what are the problems and work with other civil society organizations to make sure that we address these challenges that we are facing, not only in the Vaal, but across South Africa.
Thank you for those contributions, Samson. I now have the results of the poll that was running. The question was, do you think we are managing our water resources sustainably? 5% of you said yes. South Africa is managing its water resources sustainably, but 87% of you said no, and 3% said maybe, and 3% said unsure. So I think we have more than 2/3 majority. So really, then it's a challenge then to everyone responsible for the management of water services that the jury is out. South Africans do not believe it is being managed properly, and really we need to start doing the needful. There was also a comment earlier from Jack about a complaint about pollution upstream. It speaks to the issues we're talking about earlier, that the impact are not only felt in the immediate community, but in neighboring communities. So that is a challenge to our Gauteng team to take up that matter with Jack. I will advise Jack that you reach out directly to our colleagues in the Gauteng office to assist with that complaint. And thank you for underscoring the issues of inequality, Samsung. And I saw that input in one of the earlier comments about inequalities, how really it is the disadvantage that continue to be disproportionately impacted by these issues that we're discussing today. So on that note, I would like, on behalf of the Commission, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to our guest speakers for joining us, in this important conversation we're having about sewer challenges in the Vaal. And also would like to thank all of you who took the time to join in and be part of this webinar and the conversation we're having. And also, I would like to remind you again that the report that we're discussing will be available on our website. Please have a look out for it, go through it, and continue really to engage with us on this matter. Because as indicated by our panelists, this is not an issue that can be resolved by only one person. It's only, all of us, working together that this issue can be resolved. And that includes citizens, like Johan said. What are we contributing to this problem, and what are we contributing to resolving this problem? On that note, it is good morning from me and goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
I think so, yes.